So, what does it actually mean for society to be just? I mean, really, it's a question that we've been wrestling with for, well, thousands of years. Today, we're going to dive into it by looking at two really powerful and actually very different visions of what a just world could even look like. Here's the game plan. First, we'll get on the same page about what we even mean by justice. Then, we'll jump into the ideas of the philosopher John Rawls, and right after that, the social reformer B.R. Ambedkar. We'll put their ideas right next to each other. And then at the end, we'll talk about why this whole conversation is, frankly, more important now than ever. All right, let's get into it. Before we can really compare these two massive ideas, we have to build a foundation. We need a shared understanding of what justice even is. So, just for a second, I want you to think about it. When you hear that word justice, what's the first thing that pops into your head? Is it a judge in a courtroom? Maybe a protest in the streets? Something else? You see, it's a huge, huge concept. At its heart, this is what most definitions really boil down to. It's this idea of creating a society where everybody gets what they are due. But what exactly is due to someone? Well, that's where things get really interesting, and it's exactly where our two thinkers start to go in very different directions. And if we want to get a little more specific, justice usually stands on a few key pillars. You've got fairness, right? Impartial treatment. You've got equality, equal rights. Of course, there's freedom, individual liberty, and then there's recognition of basic human dignity and the rule of law, the idea that justice comes from laws, not just whoever has the most power. These are kind of the essential ingredients that both of our thinkers are working with. Okay, so let's turn to our first thinker, the American philosopher John Rawls. Now, his approach was pretty unique. He didn't start by looking at the messy world we have. Instead, he asked this really powerful question. If we could design a perfectly just society from scratch, what would it look like? This quote right here gets straight to the heart of Rawls's whole philosophy. For him, priority number one, the absolute non-negotiable, is protecting individual freedoms. Your freedom of speech, your freedom to believe what you want, all of that is sacred. He called his theory justice as fairness. And the key word there is fairness, specifically in the starting point. I mean, how do you get people to agree on fair rules when we all naturally want rules that benefit ourselves? Well, Rawls had this incredibly clever solution. He came up with a thought experiment he called the veil of ignorance. So imagine this. You're about to be born, but you have no idea who you're going to be. You don't know if you'll be rich or poor, brilliant or average, part of the majority or a tiny minority. It's kind of like you're about to cut a cake for a party, but you don't know which slice you're going to get. So what do? You make sure you cut every single slice as fairly as humanly possible, right? Rawls argued that from behind this veil, every single one of us would agree on two basic rules. First, the liberty principle. Protect those basic freedoms for everyone, just like in the quote. But the second one, the difference principle, is just fascinating. It says that, yeah, inequality can exist, but only if the system is set up so that those inequalities end up helping the people at the very, very bottom of the ladder the most. Okay, now, let's do a hard pivot. We're shifting from the philosopher's abstract perfect design to a social reformer's real-world battle. See, B.R. Ambedkar wasn't just thinking about a hypothetical society. He was on the front lines fighting to fix the deep, painful injustices in the one he was actually living in. And this quote, this just perfectly sums up Ambedkar's entire vision. For him, liberty, equality, and fraternity weren't just separate items on some checklist. No way. They were an inseparable trinity. You just couldn't have real liberty without equality, and you couldn't have either of those without fraternity, that sense of social solidarity, of a common brotherhood. And this right here is the crucial difference. While Rawls starts with the individual and their liberty, Ambedkar starts with social justice. He basically argued that things like voting rights or economic opportunity don't mean a thing if the society itself is fundamentally broken and unequal. You have to fix the social structure first. You see, his entire worldview was shaped by his fight against the caste system in India, which he saw as the ultimate barrier to any kind of justice. So his solutions were practical. They were revolutionary. He argued for wiping out the caste system, for using the Constitution itself as a tool for social change, and for actively building up this idea of fraternity to heal the divisions that kept people apart. So what do we have? We have a universal, abstract theory on one side, and a plan totally rooted in social reality on the other. Both are aiming for the same thing, justice, but they are taking wildly different paths to get there. Let's put them head to head and see where they really diverge. This really gets to the core of it. Rawls is asking, what are the timeless, universal principles of justice that would work for any society, anywhere, at any time? Meanwhile, Ambedkar is asking, what do we need to do to fix the specific historical injustices of this society right here and right now? And this table just brilliantly lays out how those different starting points lead to totally different priorities. So look at the social dimension. Rawls talks about a universal ideal, equal opportunity. Ambedkar, he's laser-focused on a specific problem, abolish the caste system. Or check out the economic dimension. Rawls lists clever difference principle to help the least advantaged in theory. Ambedkar's approach is way more direct. Give preferential treatment, what we might call affirmative action, to disadvantaged groups to correct for centuries of injustice. It's a fascinating contrast. So, why are we even talking about a 20th century philosopher and an Indian reformer? Well, because this exact debate, this tension between abstract principles and concrete realities, is still at the absolute heart of how we try to build a more just world today. I mean, really think about it. When we debate policies like affirmative action, aren't we basically debating Ambedkar's idea of preferential treatment to fix a specific historical wrong? And when we design social safety nets, aren't we often guided by something like Rawls's principle of making sure the system helps out the least advantaged? These ideas, they're everywhere. And this leaves us with this fundamental, ongoing tension. What's the best path to justice? Is it to create a perfectly neutral system of rules, kind of like Rawls would suggest? Or do we first have to actively intervene and fix the specific inequalities that are already baked into our societies, as Ambedkar would argue? And that brings us to a final question, something for you to chew on. If you were handed the keys, the power to build a more just world, where would you even begin? Would you put on that veil of ignorance and try to design a system of perfect fairness from the top down? Or would you roll up your sleeves and focus first on lifting up the people who have been left behind for so long? There is absolutely no easy answer to that one.